flashing red warning here. What I'm about to say is quite disturbing. There's a lot of uncomfortable language. And if you are triggered or upset by sexual assaults and violent assaults, etc., then this is definitely not the show for you tonight.
They call me Emily. Until just a few days ago, I was just a waitress, one of those invisible figures that roam the halls of luxury mansions, unknown and forgotten. My life was limited to dust and brushes, polishing marble floors, and making beds in huge rooms I never imagined I'd live in. But that mansion, the home of the famous music magnate, was never just a job. I had always felt there was something strange, something sinister, breathing behind its golden walls. Yet, I made do. I didn't have the courage to ask questions. It was a well-paid job and the mansion was luxurious. But the truth is, I felt trapped. Despite everything, I always tried not to notice the strange things that happened. Lights turning on and off by themselves, sounds in the middle of the night, shadows moving more than they should. It was as if that house, with all its magnificence, was hiding secrets I should never have discovered. But then something happened, something that changed everything. One day, while cleaning the basement, a corner I had always avoided, I found something I should never have seen. Not just an object, but a truth that shattered every illusion. The mansion was not just a house, it was a trap, and I was a pawn in a game I didn't understand. What I had discovered was changing me, making me a threat to anyone involved in that dark world. I could never go back. I had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But now everything was about to collapse, and I, the invisible waitress, was about to become the protagonist in a story no one would ever want to tell. The cold, harsh light of the basement, once seen as a blessing, now felt like an invasion. It wasn't just fluorescent. It pulsed, as if mocking me, forcing its harsh glow into every crack and crevice of the walls, revealing things that should never have been seen. Every shadow, every flicker of darkness, seemed to whisper that there was something more lurking, something I wasn't supposed to find. What was once a simple storage space now seemed like the heart of something deeply wrong, something evil. I stopped, breath coming in short gasps, my chest tight with panic. My body, weak and trembling, refused to move. It was as if the very weight of the air was pinning me to the floor, but I couldn't stay still. Something inside me demanded to know what was hidden there, even as my heart hammered against my ribs like a drum of terror. With a trembling hand, I wiped my palms on my pants. Was it sweat? Or was it something else? A shiver ran down my spine. The flashlight in my hand shook violently, its faint beam not enough to overcome the oppressive brightness flooding the room. It felt as though the very walls were alive, closing in on me with a force I couldn't explain. The basement had always been unsettling, but now it was something worse, something alive. The shadows on the floor were no longer just shadows. They were figures, twisted and unnatural, moving as if they were breathing. They weren't just there, they were moving, watching, waiting. Each step I took seemed to charge the air with suffocating tension. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I had to get out, but the stairs felt farther than they should have. Each step down felt like I was sinking deeper, as if something beneath me was dragging me into the very darkness I felt closing around me. The basement was no longer just a room. It was a trap, and I was its prey. I reached the door of the main house, my body trembling, desperate to escape the suffocating grip of the basement. But when I pushed open the door, the light that greeted me was not the warm, welcoming glow I had hoped for. It wasn't relief. It was a cold, inhuman light, an unnatural glow that made me feel as though the world had turned its back on me. It was as if I had never left the basement. The grandeur of the house, the gleaming marble floors, the chandeliers casting their cold, distorted reflections, all seemed like a facade, a polished illusion hiding the rot beneath. I moved like a puppet, my footsteps echoing in the empty hall, my mind racing, confused and terrified. There was something wrong, something I still couldn't explain. The very air was heavy, thick with the stench of luxury that now tasted like a bitter lie. This place, this so-called sanctuary, was not a refuge. It was a trap. And then I saw him. The supervisor was waiting for me, standing perfectly still at the entrance, his eyes fixed on me as if he knew I would emerge. He didn't look away when he lifted his gaze from his notes. His face was a mask of indifference, but his eyes, those eyes were different. They were empty, devoid of any humanity, yet there was something else. Something dark, something all too aware. It was as if he knew exactly what was happening, as if he was aware of a secret I was only beginning to understand. Then it hit me. This house, this life, was not just a place. It was a stage, and I was a pawn in a game I couldn't even begin to comprehend. Each step I took seemed like a descent, not toward comfort, but toward a nightmare I couldn't escape. The truth was suffocating, and it was waiting for me just behind the mask. "Are you done already?" The cold question hit me like a blow to the heart. His voice, emotionless, sounded far too calm, too controlled. But there was something underneath, something dark I couldn't decipher. Maybe he was trying to hide the fear he was feeling too. Or maybe he was trying to protect me from a truth no one wanted to face. My mind buzzed, paralyzed. I couldn't believe what I had seen. The images tormenting me, those scenes of horror I never thought were real. But I had seen them, and now there was no escape. I nodded, unable to say a word. The feeling of helplessness was crushing me. Every fiber of my being screamed for me to run, to flee from this rotten world I had just uncovered. But I couldn't, not anymore. "Good," he said, glancing at his watch with a speed that made me shiver. There was something unsettling about that gesture, as if he was trying to get rid of me, as if he wanted me to disappear before anyone discovered me. "The boss wants everything settled tonight. You can go." His words were tense, as if they were trying to conceal a secret too dark to reveal. His voice sounded tired, but his eyes, those eyes betrayed a truth I wasn't ready to see. I turned to leave, but something stopped me. His words, cold as ice, froze me in place, like invisible chains binding me to the floor. It was as if I had never been free, as if I was already part of a game I hadn't chosen, and worse, I couldn't get out. His gaze pierced my skin. There was something behind those eyes that made me tremble, a hidden truth, an impending danger, and I was at the center of the storm. "Don't forget," he whispered, his voice cold as a knife. "You signed a confidentiality agreement." It wasn't a warning like the others. It was a sentence. His gaze pierced me, a shadow of threat that hung in the air, like a blade ready to strike. He knew everything. He knew I had seen too much, that I had uncovered the secret they would do anything to keep hidden. What I had just discovered wasn't just forbidden. It was dangerous. I realized in that moment my life was changing forever. My breath grew shallow, my mind clouded by fear. But I didn't dare ask. The silence had already said everything. The message was clear. I would pay the price for the truth. "What you saw," he continued, his voice now lower, more unsettling, "is not just dangerous, it's something that shouldn't exist. But you saw it. And now, there's no way out." I realized in that moment, my life was changing forever. I would never be able to look at those gleaming rooms, those immaculate hallways, without knowing what was hiding beneath that golden facade. I would never be able to ignore the truth that was now devouring me. The illusion was over. The silence grew heavier. Every minute that passed seemed to stretch on endlessly, as if time itself had stopped to allow me to grasp the gravity of what was happening. The door I had crossed to enter this house wasn't just a physical door, but an invisible boundary, and now, having crossed that line, I could never go back. I nodded, but my tongue felt like it was chained. Every word I wanted to speak broke apart as my heart pounded in my chest with such force I almost felt like I would explode. My hands trembled, but I didn't dare move them. The silence that followed his words was unbearable, heavy like a fog I couldn't clear. "Do you understand?" he said finally, his words cold and precise like ice picks. "You can't get out anymore, and now, even if you wanted to, You would be useless. There's no way out, Emily. There's nothing you can do. I knew there was no chance of escape. I knew I was already trapped. Every move, every breath felt like a futile act, as if I were trying to break free from something already consuming me. Now I was trapped in an invisible web, made of secrets, threats, and guilty silences. The truth I had discovered would never be just a secret again. It was a fate that would haunt me, that would chase me until my last breath. I would never have the same life again. Now I knew too much to be left to live without paying the price. It was the point of no return. The cold night air hit me like a slap as soon as I stepped out. The chills seemed to sharpen my mind, but the anxiety crushing my chest wouldn't go away. Yet, the fear that paralyzed me was nothing compared to the fury building inside me. Why did it have to be me to discover all this? Why not someone else? Sitting behind the wheel, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white, as if trying to stop the furious beating of my heart. My mind refused to process what I had just seen. Every single detail of that dark world was etched in my mind, and the anger, that furious anger, was what controlled me. I no longer cared about money, status, or what I was leaving behind. What I had uncovered had dug a chasm inside me, a truth that would be forever etched in my heart. I felt I would never be the same, and the truth, it was too terrible to forget. Turning the key in the ignition, the engine roared. But as I accelerated into the night, a cold sensation washed over me. Someone was watching. It wasn't fear, it wasn't paranoia. It was a deep unease, one that froze my bones, an echo telling me that what I had uncovered would never just be a secret. It would stay with me forever. And now it was too late. I was no longer just a cleaning woman. I was a witness to hidden truths, a keeper of secrets no one would ever want to hear. I was pulling away from that world, but its abyss was already following me, and the truth, that terrible burning truth, would haunt me forever. The streets were empty, and the world around me seemed to vanish. Every sound of the city felt muffled, distant, as if it no longer belonged to my reality. But the worst part? The relentless thoughts chasing me, like shadows in the streets, invisible but always present, reminding me of what I had witnessed. What had I stumbled upon? What had I discovered that made me a target? Why me? The images of the basement haunted me, imprinted in my mind like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. There was no way to escape them. I had seen things I shouldn't have, things that weren't meant for my eyes. And now, I was part of it, dragged into something dark, something far beyond my control. I pressed the accelerator, the engine growling as I turned the corner. The neon lights flickered on the windshield, distorted, like flashes of a reality I couldn't grasp. But one truth burned inside me. I couldn't forget what I had seen. It was there, heavy, suffocating. The truth wasn't just something I had learned. It was something I had become. And as I drove, the nagging feeling grew stronger. I was being watched. The oppressive weight of it all gnawed at me, knowing deep down that that night would haunt me forever. And there was no escape. The days that followed were a disturbing routine. Every time I looked beyond my reflection in the mirror, I wondered who I had become. The girl who once dreamed of changing her life, of escaping the shadows of that villa, was gone. In her place was someone who had seen too much, who knew too much, but who could no longer ignore her own strength. I felt as if I had been shattered into 1,000 pieces, yet inside me, a spark of anger was growing. Fear? That would come with time. But now I felt that the only thing I could do was face the black hole inside me, that overwhelming awareness that gave me more power than I ever thought I had. The world outside my door didn't stop. The streets were the same. The people walking past me were the same, but I was no longer the same. I wasn't afraid to look into the eyes of those who passed me by, because I knew that something darker than them was plotting behind the scenes. And I had realized that I never wanted anything else but to enter this dangerous game. The villa, its secrets, the death that loomed over me. Everything was just the beginning of something I would control. Things change when you see them for what they are, and now I saw. I didn't know yet what would happen, but one thing was certain. If they tried to stop me, they would find out that the real Emily was the one who knew how to play with the shadows, not the one who feared them.